Hey, welcome back to my channel. This is Ben from Dorset Design Build, and this is the first video in a new series on how to design a Fender Acoustasonic Tele in Fusion 360. I'm going to be covering all of the CAD and CAM in order to build this guitar, so make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification button so you won't miss any of these episodes. And if you want access to the Fusion files that I'm producing during these videos, then check out my Patreon site below. So let's get started. So I'm going to try a little bit of a different approach in these videos. I'm going to make a master sketch, and I'm going to attempt to put all of my sketches and construction plans and canvases in that master level component. And we'll see how that works out. Certainly will be easier to find the sketches. Okay, so if we go to our data panel, I have pre-filled a couple of folders here. I've got a photos folder that I downloaded 4 photos of this guitar off the internet. And I've also got a pattern drawing folder where I downloaded and cropped images out of the Fender patent for this guitar. Not knowing how accurate these drawings are, but a little bit more on that later. So let me go back to our folders here. So what I want to do is I want to make a canvas with this body top image. But if I just go ahead and insert a canvas right now and pick the body top, Fusion is going to, or this canvas feature, is going to ask me for a surface to put it on. So all I've got to choose from at this point is one of these 3 surfaces adjacent to the origin. So I'll click on this top surface and then go ahead and scale it up so we can see it. And click on OK. But look what happened here. This canvas is not inside the master, it's inside the top level component. So I think to work around that, we're going to have to make something in the master that has a surface on it and then use that to attach the canvas to. So I'm going to undo a couple of times. We still have our master component, and I'll close down the data panel. And so I'm going to go up to, well, I'm going to create a sketch here within the master component. And we'll do that on this same top plane. We get spun around here. There we go. And I'm going to create a rectangle, actually a center point rectangle. And I'm just going to roughly make this the size of the blank that we would need to cut this out of. Size really isn't important here. I'm going to make it, let's just call it 14 by 20. And by the way, I am in inches here. So you can change your default setting here in document settings, but I've got it set to inches. Okay, so we now have a sketch. Let's open up our master and open up sketches and double click on that slowly. And I'm just going to call this temp. This is our temporary sketch just for the purpose of getting that canvas inside the master level component. So I'm going to finish the sketch, and now when I go to insert canvas, and I'm going to pick my body top image, I can select this surface right here. And when I do that, you'll see that we get something that is actually fairly well scaled to the rectangle that we just made, which is convenient. So I'm going to go ahead and OK out of that. And we'll see now we have a canvas folder inside the master. So that's exactly what we wanted. Now, so the first order of business on the canvas is to scale this appropriately. And to scale a canvas, you right-click on it and go to Calibrate. Okay, and now I can zoom in, and I need a known distance in this photo. And I think the distance that I'm going to use is the string spacing at the bridge. So I can clearly see the strings, and I'm going to click here on the low E string where it intersects the bridge, and on the high E string where it intersects the bridge. And then I looked up ahead of time what this was supposed to be, and it's supposed to be 51.7 millimeters. So I've got to put millimeters in because our default value is inches. So that scaled things up. And now let's take a quick look and see if that is anywhere in the ballpark. And one thing we know that this is a 25.5-inch scale guitar. And I want to do a quick aside here. If we go to the data panel, and if you happen to be a Patreon supporter of mine, I have made a Dorset Design Build team account. And if you're a Patreon supporter, you will be invited to join this team. So you will see all of the files that I use, and you will get live updates whenever I change this file. And you'll be able to download this and make any modifications you want on your system as well. But one of the nice things here is if I open this project on the web and I bring in this panel from my web browser, you can see all of these folders, all these JPEGs are here, and then there will be a list of all of the Patreon supporters that are a member of this design. But what I wanted to show you here is the wiki pages. So I've set up a few, and I'm going to do a few more during the course of this video series. But one of the things I've got here is Acoustasonic specs. So if I open that up, I've got all sorts of information. For instance, if we want to know the scale length, that should be in here, right here, 25.5. We've also got the spacing of strings. Actually, I got that wrong. I said 51.7. It's 54 millimeters is our string spacing at the bridge. So this wiki is already coming in handy. So, but those are the two pieces of information we want right now. 25.5-inch scale and 54 millimeter string spacing at the bridge. So let me minimize this, and we'll go back to our Fusion file, and let's recalibrate that. So I'm going to close down the data panel. I'm going to recalibrate the canvas. So I right click on the appropriate canvas, pick calibrate, and then we'll zoom in here, and we'll go from this low E string to this high E string, kind of the center of each. And I'm going to type in 54 millimeters and press enter. So that scaled things up a little bit more. So what I want to validate here is half the scale length is what the measurement from the 12th fret to the bridge should be. So let's just do, we're not going to do a calibrate, but we'll go through the motions of doing a calibrate here. And I'm going to click on the middle of the 12th fret and go down, probably right here would be considered the start of the bridge. And that is 12.85. We would want 12.75 as half of that 25.5 scale. So that's pretty darn close. So I'm going to stay with that scaling. And this scaling is just for the body, so it doesn't have to be extremely accurate. But we will be extremely accurate when we get into fret spacing and how the neck aligns with the bridge, or vice versa. Okay, so I'm going to hit escape, and we're not going to do that recalibration. Okay, so now let's go ahead and hide our temp sketch, and let's make a new sketch. Well, let's turn on our origin. Okay, and you can see here that this guitar is not centered horizontally. So I'm going to right click on the canvas and do an edit canvas and use these arrows, and then I can successfully move this so that it is centered. And I think vertically I'd like to center this over the center of the sound hole. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, so now the canvas is positioned so that we can draw over it. So in order to do that, we're going to make a sketch. We're in the master level component, so that's where our sketch is going to go. So I'll click on New Sketch, and we will click on this top plane. And now I think what I'm going to do is start by making some little helper lines. And then we may actually have to rotate this canvas a little bit, but let's start with the helper lines first. So I'm going to get a line here. I'm going to start at the center and go straight down and end right here at the, the end, the butt part of the body. And I didn't turn on construction lines, so I hit Escape, click on this, press X, or I could have come over here and done it by clicking in the palette. But now I've got something that's a vertical line in our sketch, and you can see it kind of stays between the strings here, which is good. Let's do another one coming up from the origin. So I'm going straight up to this point, and I want to make sure that I am at 90 degrees, which you can see right here. Okay. And again, I'm going to click on this and press X for construction. So you can see that this is actually a little bit skewed. The canvas is a little bit skewed. It's right down the middle here, but as we come up here, it's a little off. And another thing that looks a little off is the peg, the strap peg, is not quite in the center. That's assuming they put that in the center. I don't know, but I certainly would on my guitar. So I'm going to rotate this canvas just slightly. So let's get out of our sketch, which has these two guidelines in it right now, and right-click on our canvas and go to Edit Canvas, and now we can do a rotation. But you'll see that if you try to do it with the control, it's going too fast. So what I'm going to do is just type in a very small amount here. Let's say 0.5, half of a degree. And that looks much better here. We're going through the dots. We're still going through the strings. And it's actually not too bad down there. So I think I'm going to leave that. So I'm going to OK out of that. So we did our slight rotation of the canvas. Now, this was the sketch that we just put these two vertical guidelines in. So I'm going to slow double click on that, and I'm going to call this the body outline. All right, so we're going to go back into that body outline. So I will double click on its little icon here to open up the sketch. And what I like to do is add a bunch of guides. And better show you than babble here, but I'm going to get a line, and I'm going to start this. I want this line to be at the widest part of the lower bout. So I'm going to go actually a little bit too wide here. But the one thing I want to make sure of is that this is a horizontal line. And you can see that it's a right angle to the vertical line that we have there. So that is indeed horizontal. I mean, you can check by clicking on it and going up to a horizontal constraint, and it'll probably say it's over constrained. It's already constrained to be horizontal, which is good. Okay, I'm going to click on that, do an X to make it construction. I'm going to go back to my line tool, and this time I'll pre-select it being construction. The next line I want to do is somewhere close to the waist. Again, this is a little bit too big, but we're going to come back and tweak those. The third line is going to be the upper bout. It's really going to serve two purposes. It's going to be the width, maximum width of the upper bout, and it's also what I like to call the line of asymmetry. So everything starting down here, working our way up to this point, is probably symmetrical, and then these lines here, this part of the outline is obviously not going to be symmetrical. So now that we have those three lines in, the important thing with all these three lines, they're already constrained to be horizontal, but I also want to constrain them so that they are centered on this axis. So the way I'm going to do that is I'll hit Escape. I'm going to go up to this horizontal vertical constraint. which I like to think of as horizontal and vertical alignment. Okay, so I'm going to click on this vertical alignment, and if I zoom in on this line and hold down my shift key, at some point I'm going to get an X. That X is the center of this construction line. So if I click on that, I'm saying I want the center of this construction line to be aligned with this point in the origin. And you'll see that it moved left a bit. So we're going to do the same thing with this line. I'm going to hold down my shift key. As I hover over it, at some point I'm going to get that center X. When I do, I click, and then I click on the origin. So this one is now horizontally centered. And we'll do the third one, same thing. Hold down shift. We'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. Hold down shift. This one's a little left of center. There's the X, so I click, I go back to the origin, and I align there. Okay, so now I'm going to hit escape to get out of that constraint. And now you will see if I move this, look at the left side is moving as well. So I can still move this line up and down, but it's always centered about the vertical axis here. So what I want to do is, now that I can size this and move this, I want to get this at the maximum width, which looks to me to be somewhere around there. Okay, now this is the waist, so I'm going to move this up to where the minimum width is. Oops, got a little too narrow there. Now you can see that this one's not extremely symmetrical. It could be that this body is not really symmetrical, but I'm going to make it symmetrical. So let's kind of split the difference here, come out a little bit. Well, you know what? This line is a little screwed up here. I guess my constraint, I might have two lines here. Let me delete this. Oh, I do. Okay. That's what's going on. All right, so I'm going to remake this line. So I go up to my line tool. I've got construction on. I'm just going to make it a little bit too wide to start with. I'll click the check mark. I'll hit escape and then click on this and hold down the shift key. And at some point, oh, you know what? Let's go up and get our constraint first. So horizontal, vertical, hover over the line with the shift key down. If I zoom in, you can see there's the center, and I want that aligned there. Okay. So now I'll hit escape to get out of the constraint. And now it's much more symmetrical. So, okay, that to me looks like the narrowest part of the guitar right there. So I'm going to leave that line there. And we just have this last one to deal with. This one looks pretty good, maybe down a little bit. All right, so that's looking pretty symmetrical to me. Except obviously the two upper horns are not symmetrical. Okay, so a couple more guides. We've got a point right here that we're going to start our tracing at. But I want a point right here and a point right here, which I will do by just putting a line there. So I'm going to click and come down with a short vertical line. Click the check mark. Same thing over here. So again, I'm trying to get the highest point on those horns. That's sort of where the transition point is going to be. So I'll hit escape here, and now I can move these lines around and, you know, really, once I'm zoomed in, really hone in on what the real top spot is, which looks right about there. Now, we do need another piece of information here. We need the back, because we can't see where this body crosses the neck, because the neck is obscuring it. So we're going to bring in another canvas, which is going to be the back, and we're going to need to rotate and align that to this front canvas. So let's finish our sketch, and now let's spin this around so that we're seeing the back side, but we're seeing the front image on the back side. So we want another canvas here. Okay, so let's look down in our timeline, and when we edit this sketch, which we're going to come back in and use this sketch right here, this body outline, here it is in the timeline. we're going to use that, we're going to edit that to do our outline. We want to make sure that the canvas, the back canvas, is before this sketch, because anytime you edit a sketch, you're going back in time to when it was created, when it exists in the timeline, and then you're just changing the contents of it. So I'm going to rewind the timeline, and that will allow me to insert the second canvas before the sketch. And you can see the sketch doesn't even exist in our browser anymore because we rewound the timeline. Okay, so I have the master level component selected. I insert a canvas, and I want the body bottom this time. And I'm going to pick a plane to go on. And let's see, let's turn on our temp sketch. That's going to allow us to get the canvas into this master level component. So I'm going to click there. And now you can see it needs to be scaled a bit, but it's also needs to be flipped around. So I'm going to use this handle to flip it so that it matches the back side of the front canvas image. And now if I use this handle, this is a symmetrical scaling. I want to stay away from this and this because those are vertical and horizontal only scaling. So I'll do a symmetrical scaling, and you can see we kind of got it within range here. But a little tough to do this, to make this match. So I'm actually just going to put it over here for now and show you a little trick that I like to align front and back sketches with. So I'm going to do an OK, and I'm going to right click on this and do a calibrate. But before I do that, I want to change our timeline back so that we can edit this body outline sketch, and double click on this, and there it's open. What I want to do is do an inspect. So generally I like to just press, oh here it is, I for inspect, but it goes to the measure dialog box. And if I click on this waistline, I've got a length value right here in this measure dialog box. So if I simply click on that value right there and close it, Fusion puts it in my copy paste buffer. So now if I go back to calibrating my canvas, I can go into this canvas and try to do a waist, get as close to the narrow waist as I can, and click and click. And now what I'm going to do is a paste, Control V, and there's my value. And now it's the canvas got scaled to that waist value. So now when I right click on the body bottom and edit the canvas, I can move this so that it should look like the right size there. And boy, it doesn't look right at all, does it? Let's try that one more time. So I'm going to OK out of the edit. I want to click here to look at the length, which is 8.874. Okay, so I'm going to go into my body bottom, and I'm going to calibrate, and I'm going to go from this point here on the waist to this point here, and type in 8.874 and enter. Okay. I don't know why somehow I screwed that up the first time, but now we can right click on the body bottom, edit canvas, which is going to allow us to move it on top of the other canvas. And this looks pretty good. I'm actually going to center it real quick. So what do we have to do to center it? Let's hide the other one, the body top canvas. And now I can move my horizontal arrows and get that center of that neck right where we want it. And now let's turn the other canvas on and see how close we are. It looks pretty good. All right. So I'm fine with that. So I'm going to do an OK. And now we want an additional guideline inside this body outline sketch. So let's finish the sketch we're in. Double click on the body outline sketch, and we've got a center line, which is great. So I'm going to hit L for line, And I'm going to start right here, making sure that I'm snapping to that middle, and I'm going to come out to the edge of the neck. And this is something we may want to come back into this sketch later on when we extrude our neck to make sure that this neck pocket is wide enough. So I'm going to click here and do an OK, and I'm actually going to put a dimension on this. I don't care what that dimension is just yet, but that'll allow us to come back at a later time. I'm going to make this 1.008. I'll make it 1.01. Okay, so we can come back into this sketch and change this, and everything will accommodate it, hopefully. So I'm going to get another line. Again, I'm going to start right here in the center, and I'm going to come out. Now, I could type in the same distance here, but I'll show you a little trick. I'm going to go up to my constraints and get the equal constraint. Type on the line that I first did, type on the second line, and now they are equal in length. So if I do a dimension on this, you can see that's 1.01. If I clicked here, it's going to say it's over constrained. Yeah, so I'm going to cancel. Okay, so now we have two horizontal lines where this neck pocket starts, essentially. So I think at this point, I'm going to exit this sketch, finish it, and let's come around to the front, and let's hide the back canvas and show the front canvas. And now we have that piece of information that we needed. And it's kind of in between these two frets, so that's probably very accurate, or close to being accurate anyway. All right, so now I'm going to hide this temp sketch, and we're going to go back into body outline. Now, when I double click on this, we're rewinding the timeline back to this sketch, which we're really not rewinding it because it's the last thing in the sketch. But you see that we needed this canvas before the sketch in order to get that information. So that's why we did the timeline manipulation. Okay, so now we are going to start sketching the outline finally. So I'm going to start with an arc and just show you how an arc's not going to work. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to make sure that I get a square, which means I'm snapping to that point. And now as I try to put down an arc somewhere, you can see that's not really an arc, not even close. So I'm going to hit escape, which means we're going to have to use splines. So I'm going to go into my spline tool. Again, click right here where I'm intersecting. Now, I'm going to click on each one of these points as kind of a transition point of this continuous spline, but I also want to get a point halfway in between or somewhere close to that. So I'm just going to click here, then on my guide point, then I'm going to click halfway on my guide point again, halfway again on the guide. Now that's going to be my last one. So I'm going to click on the check mark. And you'll see that actually the curve is not that bad. But the reason I stopped here is this is where our symmetry stops. Remember, I was calling this the line of asymmetry. So when I do a spline like this on a guitar body, the order of fixing this, the things I like to do are, first I'm going to hit escape to get out of the spline tool. I like to make any transition points, which would be this point here, and this point, or any points that are at the end of the spline. I like to make their handles either horizontal or vertical. So in this case, I'm going to click on the handle and make this horizontal. So what's going to happen is when this spline is mirrored on the other side, it's going to be a nice tangent transition between the two. So I'm going to make this one vertical. I'm still in that horizontal vertical constraint. This handle right here that goes along with this dot is right here. So I'm going to make that vertical and make this one vertical. Okay, so I'm going to hit escape to get out of that constraint. So now you can see just by doing those two things, this curve is, or this spline is pretty close to the body. And the next thing I would do is just kind of move the points around if necessary, if they're not quite on the body. But these points actually all look pretty good. Maybe this one's a little bit out. Okay. So the next thing I would do is to change the handles. This one, although I've constrained it to being vertical, I can still change its size, its length. So I'll go ahead and do that. Same thing here. And just by changing those two, we've got this looking pretty good. I don't think we need to do much there. That's pretty tight right there. To me, that looks pretty darn good. So once you've got a spline that you like on this side, we're going to mirror it over to the other side. So I'm going to go up to the mirror command, and I've already got the spline selected, and it shows up that way in our dialog box. Now I have to click here to select the mirror line. I can pick this line, but I want to be super safe on any mirrors. I like to use the origin when it is the center of what I'm working on. So I'm going to click on this green origin line, and now we should see that curve being previewed over on the other side, and it looks good. So I'm going to click OK. And these constraints are mirror constraints, which a lot of times that's a little bit too much information to really see what's going on here. So I'm going to hide my constraints, and now we get a better idea of what these splines look like. So I'm just going to click on one spline, click on the other, and you can kind of see we've got a nice shape that matches the photo really nicely. So now all we have to do is do a spline here up to this line, do a vertical line down here, and then do a spline over here. So let's go ahead and start with the vertical line. So I go to my line tool, and I'm going to make sure I intersect there, and I'm going to come down to where that curve starts. And I want to make sure that this is, actually I'm not sure if this is vertical or not. We'll probably have to come in and modify this because the neck flares out a little bit on the way down here. So I'm just gonna have a slight angle to it. If I zoom in here, I'll put it right there. Okay, now I'm going to get my spline tool again, make sure that I intersect with that line, and I'm going to come down to the bottom of this trough, halfway up to the top. We might need another one right here. Intersect there, halfway, and then intersect there. Okay, so that looks roughly pretty good. Let's go ahead and do it on the other side. So I'm going to start here on the line, come down to this trough, then let's see, I'll probably do one here, halfway up, one at the top of our horn, halfway here, and then intersecting our spline down here. Okay. So again, remember the sequence to do here. The first thing you want to make some of these control handles horizontal or vertical. So I'll go up to that constraint. This is the one that I want to be vertical. So now we have a nice transition between this spline right here and the upper one. Okay, let's see, right here, do we want a horizontal? Yeah, that looks good. And right here, we want this one to be horizontal. And at our peak here, this is going to be horizontal. And our last one that bridges to the other spline, let's see, this point's control handle is right here, and that is already horizontal, but let me click on it and make sure. Oh, that one is already horizontal. This is the one I wanted to click on. Okay, there we go. All right, so now I'm going to hit escape, and let's hide the canvas. We can hide all canvases, and we're going to hide the origin, and there is our outline, and it looks pretty good. So you want to make sure that you've got a closed outline, and the way you tell that is when you hover in the middle of it, you get a profile that gets selected. So I'm going to finish our sketch, and we're almost done here. But one thing I want to do, kind of just for yucks, is I want to go back to my data panel and go to the patent drawings, and there is a body drawing here that I want to see just how closely the patent matches the photograph. So we are going to bring in another canvas. So we're in the master level component. We're going to do an insert of patent figure 3A, insert that, and then we're going to pick this body. And let's go ahead and just use this symmetrical scaling. We're not seeing anything because I hid the canvas folder. So let's go ahead and unhide the canvas folder. And there's our new canvas, which is way too big. So let me make that a little bit smaller. Again, I'm using the symmetrical scaling handle. So that looks pretty good up there. And let's go ahead and do an OK and take a look. If we zoom in here, we can see that it's really very different. The horn shape's a little different, but what's really different is the bottom of this guitar is really cut off in the patent diagram. Let's hide our canvas and you kind of see that here's our blue line that we sketched around. That's our body outline, and there's the patent drawing. So either they changed the design after registering the patent, or they didn't really want to put an accurate drawing in the patent. Not really sure. Interesting thing is that the sound hole is also way too big. So anyway, we're going off of the drawing, not the patent. So I'm going to actually hide this. We don't really need that. And so that is the first video. We've got a nice outline of our guitar, and we will work from there.